excited to open up our talk today and to introduce you to two incredible leaders. Let's start with this. How do real people succeed in the real world of work? Kind of a loaded question, but how do they do it? What is their secret sauce? That's the question that best-selling author Joanna Barsh sets out to answer, but not by talking to well-established CEOs or motivational gurus. Instead, she dives into the trenches with some of today's brightest and boldest up-and-coming leaders. With over 30 years at McKinsey Company and 3 books to her name, we really have a lot to learn from Joanna. She's here to distill the stories of over 200 rising leaders from 120 companies around the globe, all with the aim to help millennials grow through the challenges we face at work. We're also joined by Amy Yury, who is a 15-year veteran of Google and has held multiple leadership roles on the advertising side of the business. Amy currently oversees developing video ad products for Google Marketing Solutions globally. She is also a founding member of the Women at Google Leadership Board and hosted Joanna back in 2012 at one of the first Women at Google Leadership Summits. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Joanna and Amy up to the stage. Joanna is going to dig into some of the key learnings from her recent book before being joined by Amy for a fireside chat. I just ask that you make sure you're sitting next to someone as there's an activity that will take place during Joanna's talk, and it's important that you've got a buddy. And without further ado, let's give Joanna a warm welcome.
Well, thank you. And I can see the gentleman over there. You sit next to that nice lady, right? One, and I'm here. Yeah, if you're sitting by yourself, just squidgy over, which is a technical term for sitting next to somebody. And the two of you are like back to back, front to back. Now you should sit together. Come on. It won't be painful. And it won't take much time because I've only been given 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to talk like a New Yorker really, really quickly and see if I can get you curious about yourself, about the challenges that you're facing at work. And, maybe we can have a conversation about that very, very shortly. So let's start with the first risk, which is you're here, you took a risk. Today was a big day in New York, and we're proving that terrorism is nothing to New Yorkers. So we've already jumped off a cliff. What does it feel like? What about your work? Think about the risks that you could be taking at work and you may be thinking about or avoiding. So what risk are you taking today, given that the subways are now working again? So that's no longer a risk that you couldn't get here. Think about it during this talk. I started out in 2015, after 30-something years, as Taylor said at McKinsey, to actually talk to younger people. Why? Because, it's really awful talking to CEOs who have made it. They have their stories, men and women alike, and they've been media trained, and so it's very hard to actually get to know them. Younger people don't have their stories finished yet. It's very exciting. Like, you don't know how it's going to turn out after you've interviewed them. So I thought it was a fabulous idea. I reached out to 100 or so companies. There are about 15 startups in the group. There are also individuals who are actors, artists, scientists, not your lawyers, doctors, not your normal big company employees. Every single one of these people was considered by the person recommending them to be high-performing, high potential. So that's the base. And also talked to another 55 HR professionals about them, which was very enjoyable. And we'll see what came out of that in a moment. And I basically said, what defines you? Let's talk about your childhood and how you grew up and what you think of now, what's coming to you now. It's kind of a deep psychological interview, which worked I found some interesting things out about people. And then I asked them about what is a high point at work or low point at work in the last year. And it just collected those and got those stories, which are amazing. I also asked people, what do you think about millennials? And I got an earful. What do you think about women? Interesting. Why we could talk about that later. Why I asked that question? What do you think about women? And I meant it in a truly collegial way. And what do you think about work? So we have a whole battery of what millennials think. And it is myth busting. But first, the weird thing happened that this group of people, which I had not thought about, turns out to be the most diverse group of people ever that I think have appeared in a book. So they're from all over the world. There are people working in the US from 80 different countries. I'm sure in this room we have a similar dispersion of where people come from and what experiences you've had in life already, and that's part of diversity. They also, I met married people, single people with children, married people with children, people who work in every function you can imagine, people who didn't go to college, people who went to premier colleges, you name it, I met those people. So that, to me, says we've got an interesting pool of experiences. What can we learn from them? Well, here's the first thing we learn. A lot of people make their living off of talking about millennials. I do not. First of all, I don't really make a living anymore, but secondly, when I talk to people, I generally talk about leadership. So you probably recognize these words that people talk about when they talk about millennials. My favorite being the trophy hunter. But as one millennial told me, let's just think about lazy. I'm sure in the baby boomer generation there are plenty of lazy people as well. So before we cast aspersion on millennials, let's look at every generation. So I did, and this is what I learned as well about older people, myself included. And I like the slow, because I am a little bit slower these days at 64. But nonetheless, this is complete bullshit. So you already knew that. I haven't taught you anything new yet, so I'm going to keep going. This is what they told me. To me, if you think about your life in these terms, it's pretty scary, right? You're at a place and you've just made a mistake. And you know that mistakes are not an option here. Or that you wake up every day and say, I don't even know I'm working here because work has no passion for me, and everybody says I should have passion. What about pressure? You all have deadlines. Pressure is the kind of thing that destroys health. It boils over, and then you lose sight of what it is that's really important to you. What if you were working with bullies and villains, and I wrote tough characters, but come on, for the record, we know who they are. They're assholes. What if you're working for them? What if everybody says you have to have a sponsor, and you know in your heart there is no sponsor in the people around you, and you don't know how to get one? You're not even sure you want one. You just got a bad review, literally whacked you over the head, and then the person giving you the review says, well, what do you think about that? It's like, what? What do I think about that? Then you're given an assignment. You're a superhero. You feel really good about yourself. And it turns out it's mission impossible, and nobody's ever succeeded doing that before. But you've got the job. And my favorite of all favorites, you wake up and everything sucks. What does everything suck? So that's a military term, by the way. It comes from the Army. What this means is that your job is going badly. Your relationship just exploded. You have been gaining weight at a steady pace as you're badly eating since you're not sleeping enough. And then finally, even your mother calls you up to yell at you, right? So everything sucks in that scenario. And then the final chapter of this book is work just doesn't, you have passion, but not for this. Work doesn't feel worth it. What do? Do you go or do you stay? Do you wait it out or not? So those are all the challenges that are in this book, and every story in this book is, if you would, instant experience for you. So you don't need to be 64 years old and thinking about your whole life deeply as the other training that I do for Google. You can just read the stories. So I give you the story of Greg. Let's meet Greg. He's a sports writer. He has a dream job writing for a famous magazine. He's what he likes to call a bro. So Greg's a bro, very bright one. And lo and behold, 6 months into his job, his father is hospitalized with a failing heart and probably will die. So Greg quits his job, doesn't even think about it. He moves into the hospital to help his father run his finance business. The father needs a heart, but he is not very high up on the donor list, and time is running out. So what does Greg do? Greg says, I'm going to find out about donations and see if I can solve this issue. And that's what he did. He got into it, and then he realizes the entire industry of donations is an old boys club. None of the CEOs of any of these businesses want anything to do with Greg, who's a 26-year-old guy. He says he looks like he's 12, so he doesn't have a lot of gravitas. But he comes out of this situation. There is good news here, and I'll get to it in a minute. He comes out of this situation able to change his job, help his father, and start a new business, which we'll talk about. But before I get to the punchline of that story, one of the tools that comes out of this chapter, which is bringing others on board, is something that I learned from Greg. And so I want to test it out on you. Are you okay being guinea pigs for like the next 2 minutes? Okay, the guy in the back says fine. So the rest of you, please come along. Here's what we're going to do. Pair up, and if you're a trio, then one of you can be the observer. And you sort of Dr. Freud, like just sit there like this during the next 2 minutes. One of you will be a speaker. One of you will be a listener. And if, again, as I said, you don't want to do this exercise, listen in to somebody who's doing it. You'll learn a lot. Speakers, you know who you are. You are the one who's willing to talk to the guy or lady next to you about something that seriously is important to you. It probably is bothering you right now. So you're going to get 2 minutes of free coaching. Listener, there is only one thing you have to do, which is listen. Okay? That's it. Everybody ready? You got your pairs? Go. I should hear noise now. Shh. Okay. Who amongst the listeners said something? Spoke, said anything like, yeah, that happened to me, or, yeah. How did it feel to listen without saying anything? Did anybody succeed in the 2 minutes? She did? So what did it feel like? Just shout it out.
It feels like I wasn't relating to her by not saying anything.
It's hard not to say something. That's interesting. Did anybody who is among the speakers, what did you find speaking for 2 minutes? Having the floor. Did anybody have the floor for the whole 2 minutes? Yeah? What did it feel like? Weird. I love it. Weird. It felt weird. What was weird about it?
There was no response.
Yeah. It's like it's very hard to talk for 2 minutes. But did anybody have a different experience? You got to talk for 2 minutes, and
I was like, I have a lot to say about this.
yes, yeah. Isn't it wonderful that somebody's listening for 2 friggin' minutes? You felt the same way?
Yeah, it was good to sort of vent and just get it out and think about it.
And have somebody hear you and see you. So I have done this experiment last week in Dubai, and I found that half the room thought it was weird and really hard to fill 2 minutes, and the other half thought it was like 10 seconds. It just flew by. So there's a right answer here. But the act of listening is the most powerful leadership skill you can develop. So if you have a team and you truly can listen with your heart, not from our normal stance of listening, which is, I wonder if that person's right or wrong. I wonder if I'm learning something I didn't already know. What I'm going to say to that person is where you stop listening. The minute the voice in your head starts, you are no longer listening, even if you think you are. So learning to just listen from their stance, not from yours, is a huge skill. So that's the tool. What happens to Greg? Well, you notice that Greg is no longer a sports writer. He is now a founder and CEO of a nonprofit, which is called Organize, of course, right? Organs, donating, organize. There you go. And it turns out, as Greg's dad was on the way to the hospital with his wife to have an end-of-life counseling session, a 26-year-old in Massachusetts died in a car accident or a motorcycle accident. And while he was HPV positive, his heart was in good shape. And therefore, Greg's father was the next person on the list at this hospital, got the heart, and survived, which is pretty amazing. But that's actually not the story. The story is that Greg learned as he started up Organize to listen and stop selling his ideas. And he shifted from telling people to asking people. And that made all the difference to the donors that came on board. What he learned is that if you actually engage people with the problem, I have this really hard problem I'm trying to solve. Can you help me? People's brains get engaged so fast, they can't stop thinking about your problem, and now they're on board. And it turns out the money is the easy part. So that is what Greg learned, and he managed to bring a guy named Al Roth on board, who won a Nobel Prize for designing markets. He was teaching at the time at Harvard. He's now somewhere else. I haven't tracked him down. But this is a very cool story to bring someone like that on board to a startup. So Greg learned that lesson. So now you've got listening and you've got asking, but what else could you do if bringing people on board is your challenge of the day? Start with your intention. Start as you go into a meeting or you go talk to members of your team. What is it you really want to create? If you have that squared away, then everything will fit into that framework. Most of us don't start with that. Most of us just start with, I'm just here and let's see what happens. Stand in the other person's shoes, which you know how to do. The hard part is to let go of judgment. We always stand in their shoes and then we judge them because we're human beings. Everybody does that. But if you can learn to stop judging and get curious about that person, you will actually create a connection that is very strong. You don't have to love them. You just have to try to understand them. Listen from their center, not your own center. And ask really good questions. A good question is a question that doesn't just have a yes-no answer, pretty often does not start with the word why, and opens up possibilities for solutions. So what are you trying to create is a great question to somebody who you might be having a conflict with. Tell me more about what you're trying to create. Be present, not dominant. What does that mean? Well, we know what dominant means. It means like I am the smartest person in the room, so I'm just going to keep talking. And being present means I'm alert and focused and here with you. Which is better if you want to connect to people? It's pretty clear. Being present is going to get you a lot more connections than being dominant. And the final to do is to use silence as a tool. Silence is really uncomfortable. It is also weird. And all of us fill it. If you learn to not fill it, the good thing is somebody on your team will fill it, and they might tell you something you didn't know or have a really, really good idea. So practice silence. And if someone asks you a question in a big meeting, use silence. It will cause everybody to listen harder if you use it. So those are my thoughts. I was told, did we do 10 minutes? Come on up, Amy, because at this point, I am becoming dominant, not present, so I give it to you.
Please, everybody give Joanna a warm welcome.
Oh, actually, I want to go one more. Diogo, you'll help me, one more. So this is the big so what. Amy went through training in centered leadership with me. I was really, really honored to have people from Google as part of our training when I was at McKinsey and shaping it. This is the big so what. You're an iceberg. We all see what you say and what you do, what you don't say, what you don't do. That's what we see, that's all we see, and that's what we judge. And you are so much more than that. Underneath that is everything you're thinking and feeling, and you're never going to disclose. And underneath that is you're really thinking about what matters to you, what you believe, what your values are. Sometimes you don't even know, but that's what's driving your behavior. And underneath that is your human needs. Often people talk about it as fear, but actually it's what is your deepest, deepest need as a human being. And that is what drives all of the behavior, everything that's down there. So if you start to think of yourself in that way without judgment, you're going to learn a lot. And as you read through other people's stories, you can put yourself in them and accelerate your own growth. That's what I had to say.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's an honor to have you back at Google, and yes, I do remember many of these exercises as part of the Centered Leadership Program, and specifically some of the young childhood memory exercises where you asked us to look back and talk about experiences that shaped us. So it's an honor to have you back, and thank you for coming off of a trip from Dubai. Joanna has been, traveling around the world talking about this book and obviously centered leadership. And you mentioned, that your first book, How Remarkable Women Lead, was focused on what you'd call the more experienced work set. So what drove you to say, all right, maybe I should gain new perspective? What created that sense of curiosity for you?
So it actually started with this young lady who's in the room in the front row who doesn't work at Google. Oh my God! She said, I think your book is boring. And she's my daughter, she's allowed to say that. It's really okay. And I asked her what she meant, and she said, they're so old, these leaders, I can't be them. I'm not even sure I want to be them. And so how do I get there from here is a mystery to me. And I began to think about, well, what about people under the age of 40? What is happening to them? And is it different today than it was 40 years ago? I mean, some of the people I interviewed were 80. And, I was like on the edge of my seat to make sure they made it through the interview. But they were amazing people, but they lived in a different environment, in a different situation. And today, I'm impressed. I'm in awe of millennials. So I thought it would be really cool, as I was retiring from McKinsey, to hang out with a bunch of people who actually had a lot of hope for life.
And was it?
It was. I'm still interviewing people. So if anybody wants to be interviewed, just let me know. In fact, somebody in this room was interviewed, but I'm not going to tell you who it is because everybody's confidential.
So what was the epiphany for you in terms of what would resonate in the way that it changed the way you wrote this book? I've obviously read both, and the style of How Remarkable Women Lead versus the story is a little bit different. Can you talk about what changed that?
So one interviewee said, I'm through with school. I just don't need to be taught anymore. And adults learn by doing. And the adults that I'm trying to reach, everybody in this room, you don't have that much experience. You might have 6 years, 10 years of experience, and it's your experience that's really important. But wouldn't it be really cool to have like instant experience of all these other people who faced the challenge that you're now facing, but they did it differently than you? So at least they'll give you something to think about. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to collect the tapestry of stories. Now, the internet is full of people with stories, and I started to look at them, and they're fake. It's like, Susan had an issue, and then it gives you like one paragraph, and then in the second paragraph, she solves the issue and gets promoted. So, or she doesn't solve the issue, and then the author says, statistics, had Susan only asked the question, she would have, whatever, gotten the brass ring. So I wanted to write stories that you go like, what's really going to happen? And the answer is, I don't know, because they haven't lived their whole life yet. Will that person become famous? I don't know. But to me, they became very, very interesting. And the second thing I wanted to do is make it real. And you could argue with me that it's not real enough for you, and that may indeed be the truth. But I didn't want to sort of say, Amy, I want to leave you with thinking about why you're so uncomfortable about that question. Instead, say, Amy, why don't you go meet that person over there and have a discussion about what gets them excited? That's something you could actually do, as opposed to go home and go, what did she say? So that was my goal.
You did something at the end of every chapter as well to try to give kind of a toolkit for folks to think about how to solve the challenge. How did you think about creating the different solutions that you did? And is there any order in which you could go through in solving these work challenges?
So, everybody's challenge is different. And I became quite humble. Could only put, the original book it was like 400 pages, and it had 120 stories in it, and now it's 75 stories, and you may still find it too long. But nonetheless, I went through all the stories, bottoms up, kind of like a Google data mining exercise, although I was an English major. I apologize. And I found what these people did. And then through my own experience of centered leadership and being at McKinsey and being a consultant and on, I put them into a structure, which is first, one CEO once said to me, just tell me what to do first, second, third, in that order. So I tried to order the actions at the end of each chapter based on, if you don't know where you are, start at the top, and if you've already done that, go to the place where it's now news for you.
Great. I know that I am managing people. People always say, okay, well, where do I start? How do I do this? So I appreciate you giving that specific advice. I love the titles of the challenges, and you went through all of them up front. Some of them definitely probably hit closer to home for Googlers, including the what do you do after a poor review, because we just had our perf review cycle, so everybody just got their annual feedback and might still be digesting and thinking, okay, now what do I do next? I also love some of the titles, including when you have to be a superhero, because working for a company like Google, I know people feel like the bar keeps moving higher and the task keeps getting bigger. And to your point, I have to solve a problem that nobody's ever solved before. I personally love when risk-taking feels like jumping off a cliff. And for some of us, we either enjoy jumping off cliffs or are afraid of heights. What is your favorite challenge in the book?
When I woke up this morning, for some reason, I was thinking, because of that jump off a cliff thing, of cliff divers, which I woke up with like a semi-heart attack. It's like, I don't want to do that. So my favorite chapter is actually when everything sucks, because it came from a military story of a woman who'd been to Afghanistan. And she taught me some things that I had really never thought about. I don't know if anybody has military experience in the room, but it's completely different than anything in life. So I put her in the book for that reason. There were other people where everything sucks. For example, a woman who started up a really cool business with her friends from her prior work. And she was kicked out by those friends and on her own one June morning and had to restart herself. So there are all kinds of situations where you find a man who worked in an automotive company who his marriage started falling apart. He was working on the most exciting thing, renewable energy in cars. He was totally committed to this. And then they shut his project down, which I'm sure happens at Google, once in a while. And he just imploded. And somebody said to him, one day you'll tell your grandchildren about this project. And he was thinking, I don't have a job. I'm not gonna have any grandchildren. So he had to pull himself together. So that's why I like that chapter. But what it does is it helps you prepare for something that hopefully you'll never be in, but I'm sure you will, because work ends up, after a great week, the next week it sucks, and you didn't ask for it. And the first thing you do to prepare is to be mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually resilient, which I hadn't thought about, which is why the military forces people to go through physical training that's awful, because you develop stamina and resistance and alertness in the midst of the unexpected.
So resilience, curiosity, bravery, what are some of these attributes that, if you look at the collection of stories and the people that you've seen, obviously their stories are not complete, but what are some of the attributes that you've seen are common amongst those that have learned how to overcome challenges and even reframe challenges as opportunities.
Yeah. So people, you remember that first slide with the stereotypes. People think of millennials as waiting for someone to hand them the answer, and I didn't find that at all. I found the strongest element to be curiosity and bravery. So a challenge is something you really don't want to face because you know it's not going to be fun, and it might actually be painful. And yet, the people who faced these challenges did so because they were driven by a desire to grow. And some of them were driven by fear. So a fear that if they didn't grow, they would fall behind. And in this generation, if there's one theme that I didn't know I would find, it is that you are growing up with uncertainty. And when I grew up in the 50s, it was like fake certainty, but it was certain. You lived in a house and your dad came home at night and you never saw him, but you knew he was working and everything was cool and you played. And that was your job, just to play every day. Whereas today, I think people from the internet, from being global citizens of the world, from having parents who've lost their jobs, you grow up with uncertainty. And that means that you got to be growing wherever you work, because you're in charge of you. You already know that. Now it's up to older people who manage you to realize that that's what's driving you. And once you're an owner of your future, then you basically measure everything in terms of, am I growing? And challenges are the best way to grow. So the people in this book, they didn't all succeed, but they all sort of took the challenge on.
In looking at those stories of people and those that are continuously growing, did you find any differences in terms of the stories from men or women?
So I counter-programmed the book because there was no theme that I found. Maybe you could prove me wrong, but men told me that women were more aggressive, more driven, more goal-driven, were really kicking ass. And women told me that men were more courageous, willing to take a chance, and kicking ass. So, it was, and there were all kinds of people in the book. So I put in men who were afraid, men who made mistakes and had to live through it, and I put in women who were totally, bold, aggressive, because that's what I heard. And then I put the opposite in as well. So there are, for example, quiet people in the book who are very introverted and still heroes. And then there are noisy people in the book too, who are very outgoing and able to lead through their social skills.
So I have a couple more questions, but I want to give you guys a chance to ask Joanna some questions about centered leadership, about women's leadership, about grow where you work, about life challenges, about bringing your daughter with you along the journey. And so on that, I just will ask one more question and turn it over to you guys. What do you hope? Obviously, you've mentioned, Gabby, and she's part of the intro of this in terms of the impetus for writing this book. What beyond your own family, what do you hope people will take away from this book?
I'm passing the baton. So I'm 64 years old. I worked not my whole life. I worked in the movie business and some other things before McKinsey. But you are the future. Millennials are our future. So my hope is that this book accelerates enough people to take on challenges and become leaders at very early ages. And maybe you already are all leaders who are in this room. And by leader, I don't mean somebody who runs like a company with 1.5 million employees. Leader meaning somebody who sees something and makes it happen because you believe it should happen. It should be the way reality is. A person with vision, a person with a drive, some kind of purpose. And if you don't have any of that right now, I hope this book will help you on your journey to find it. Because it took me 50 years to realize that meaning is, for me, the most important thing in life. And it sort of beats all else. Clearly loving, having friends you love, having family you love, helps you along that journey. But I discovered, at least for me, that it wasn't enough, that you needed to be able to help people be part of something bigger than you. And that's what this is. So I want you to take action based on the challenges that you're facing. That's what I want.
I'm going to turn it over to you guys if you have a couple questions.
They're stupefied. Like, oh
Tina,
my God.
kick us off.
So in the be dangerous question to take us off track a little bit, but I'm dying to know, how would you think about the challenges that you framed in the book for millennials compared to Gen X? And does it matter if you're in the Gen X generation working at Google? How do you see that dividing
It's
line?
over for you.
I know.
Just kidding.
That's what I'm
Just
worried
kidding.
about.
All right.
Where's that chapter?
Yeah. And there are a couple of you in the room who may consider yourselves more Gen X than millennial. Gen Xers told me that they were raised to suck it up until they reached the goal that they wanted. That for some reason, they felt the loyalty of the company, that if they were to wait it out and gain the skills, that they would get where they wanted to go. And millennials basically said, I'm out of time. I can't wait that long. In fact, maybe I can wait a year. So to me, that was the fundamental difference between the two. If you and as Sheryl Sandberg admonished me just a few weeks ago, never say all, because it's not true of all people. It's always true of some people, but not all people. So Gen Xers, I think, can learn a lot from millennials, which is, what are you waiting for? Do it now. Take the risk now. Ask the question now. And if somebody says no, they say no. You will have learned from the experience. And I said something a few minutes ago, that a lot of the people in the book took on challenges and, quote unquote, did not succeed in the normal scheme of things, right? They didn't get the promotion or the gold ring or whatever you were hoping they would get, but they learned something. So in that sense, they succeeded through every challenge that they met. There was a story of a woman who got a bad review. Actually, it was a pretty good review. She worked for a tech company, not yours. And she was an African woman, set very high standards for herself. And so she didn't like the review she got. And people didn't like her, apparently. That was in the review as well. That, she's pushy. And she set the bar high, and she couldn't stand mediocrity. Does this sound familiar? And everybody around her was mediocre in her mind. So she quit. And I had the conversation with her. I'm sure that company was sad that she quit. But she said, this is not the culture I want to be part of. I don't want to fit in and have harmony. I like reaching for perfection. And so the only thing that saddened me with her, and I call her Ife in the book, if you read the book, is that she was striving for perfection because she felt she had to make it. It's one thing to strive for perfection because it motivates you. It's another thing to actually think you have to achieve perfection, because that ain't going to happen. So in that sense, Ife made me sad, but I kept in touch with her. She ended up in a startup, and she's really happy doing, striving for perfection and creating software that the world needs.
So you just said the difference is act now versus wait a little bit later. And one of the first chapter hit me personally because I just lost a longtime colleague who said, I don't have passion in what I'm doing here any longer. And you mention in the book, though, that you say, as part of the toolkit, maybe wait a year before you actually make a move. So how do you think about
but there's a lot you can do in that year.
Yeah, because you're saying millennials want to act now, and you are giving more that advice that I would say is, take a little bit of time before you make that action. And that was the same advice I gave her. I said, just stick it out for another couple of months, try to do this with your job differently, do this. And she came back to me after taking a little short leave and just said, I can't. I'm no longer, my head and heart are no longer in this. So.
Well, first of all, the good news is you may have lost her, but the world didn't lose her.
No, I know. And I'm helping her find something else.
Yeah.
So
let me rephrase. She was probably pretty busy while those few months were going by in which she was meditating on her decision. So let's say you're in a job you don't want to be in, and I'm telling you, maybe you should wait a year because it's a brand new job. You will not have seen the whole business cycle if you leave in 3 months, because if it's a really bad fit, you'll know it and you should leave right away. If, in fact, you're just uncomfortable, you're not learning fast enough, you feel stagnant, then what do? Well, you talk to a lot of people. So you take that time to learn, you go learn something else. Do something outside of work that expands your horizons. So don't wait as in, okay, I guess Soul Cycle starts in 5 hours, so I guess I'll just hang out here and go there tonight and see if I can pick my spirits up. Instead, you really just network like crazy. If you're introverted, absolutely network like crazy, and go ask people what their jobs are. Learn how to do it. Ask your boss, I want to do more. I'm bored to tears, for God's sakes, Amy. Give me something else to do. And Amy will dream it up and give it to you. And you won't get paid more, but you will have learned more. So during that year, be busy growing. And there are very concrete things you can do to do that. I see this gentleman, patient as can be.
Well, thank you for coming.
Debunking millennials yet again.
I just had a quick question for either one of you. If you guys have a story or anecdote from kind of early on in your careers, the first time that you maybe did have this impactful leader, and kind of maybe what it looked like to you or how it did influence your kind of career going forward.
Take it away, Amy.
The question is, did I have an impactful leader?
Yeah, early on in your career, was there anybody that stood out and really you kind of recognized, oh, this is a, an obvious great leader, and or really bad,
yes.
and they're helping me in this way, or kind of push you to do something, maybe challenge you in some way?
So yes, on both sides, right? Those that were not as, those that you don't admire and you observe very carefully for all the things that you make a long mental list of the things that you'll never do when you're a manager. And then I love, Eileen Naughton is somebody that endorsed Joanna's book. And Eileen started in the New York office long time ago when I was here, and she sat one cube away from me and became somebody that I helped her figure out how to navigate Google, because she'd come from Time Inc. And so I helped her figure out Google. She helped me then learn a lot about leadership, women's leadership, and we became a longtime friends. She's obviously gone on to be many different roles within Google, and most recently is now our head of people operations, and I had the opportunity to see her last week. And one of the things, she did a talk on leadership a long time ago, and she said, be a snob for talent, meaning hire really amazing people that are better from you. That was one of the things. And she also gave me a lot of permission early on to not always be thinking about vertically climbing, but the importance of horizontal, and as Cheryl refers to it, climbing the jungle gym, to kind of have lots of different experiences. And having somebody like her who had done that in her career, she's moved, and now you see even within Google, to lots of different roles and functions, kind of gave me permission to think about doing the same.
Sometimes villains can actually teach you as much as great leaders. So early in my career, I worked in retail. And there was a woman who was my height, which means that she was height challenged, and Mrs. Wilner. And she tore people down. She actually enjoyed it. So I think she was on the spectrum of sociopaths, close to the edge. And I developed a bloody nose. I would come unpredictably. I was running some shops in a retailer. And I did all kinds of cool things in those shops to get people to actually stop and buy things, or even just look. So I had everything upended and looked all like it would fall apart in a second. And she took the whole team to the shop, and in front of all the customers, screamed at me till I was in tears. So that was my earliest memory of what it's really like to work for a villain. And so I switched retailers. And I ended up with a taller, blonder version of the same woman, and worked for her. And she did similar things that taught me, essentially, if the person doesn't want you to succeed, There are a billion things that you have to get right in your job, and you will get something wrong, and they will find it. So I learned that I couldn't be perfect, that it was really embarrassing when I had a bloody nose in front of customers, and it gave me the impetus to go to business school and completely change my career. So I went from retail to consulting, where only clients yelled at me. Oh, got a lot better.
Another
Awesome,
important lesson that I give and have tried to follow, which is, once you work for a terrible boss, you kind of say, okay,
Cut your losses.
yeah, find great bosses.
So I opened up your book on an airplane, and I think it was in the foreword, but I was reading that what I really love about it is it's designed to, you can read any chapter. You don't have to go chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I think that's a really unique approach. I went straight to the table of contents and was looking at what do I want to start with here first? Wanted to ask you why you made that choice, and if that was based on some of your interviews with people that you met with, based on what books are available in the marketplace and how they're structured, or what led you to make that decision?
The simple answer is I did structure it in a way that I thought people on average would evolve. However, you're going to be only interested in the challenge that you're facing. So you should start with that challenge and get into it and see if you can get value from it. I enjoyed all the chapters, and I spent a lot of time thinking about where they should go. So it turns out that there are a couple of basic themes in the book. One is about fear, and that shows up in pressure. It shows up in superheroes. And it shows up in taking risk or speaking up, daring to challenge. Another one is carrying meaning, purpose, that shows up in the first and the last chapter, and feeling purposeful. And then there's a third theme around people. And so I put all those guys together, bringing people on board, even when you just wish you could just tell them what to do and make them do it, and they just won't do it. Or working with creeps. Or trying to get a sponsor. So those kind of fit together. But you're going to have the best experience of the book if you start with what matters to you.
Thank you.
All right, time for 2 more questions. I know we're running a little over for folks that have to leave.
Hi. So I guess after listening to you, I fall in the millennial category. I thought it was a Gen X. Something that I've noticed
I'm a millennial too, even though I'm an old one.
Something I've noticed in trying to network or start new conversations is that often it's really hard to get on the connecting side with people, as often I find that because of whatever perceptions they have, they want to other you instead. And so I know that listening to them is a good strategy to try and bring them back, but it's always how do you get to that listening side? How do you ask questions that will help open them up, or what are things that strategies that you can do, getting to that part or in that process to kind of maybe open them up, maybe bring them back?
That's a really good question. So there's a couple of things for you to think about. One is, who do you admire? And as you reach out to people you admire, actually tell them why you admire them, specifically, not generically. There is a woman in the book whose name is now escaping me, jet lag, let's blame it on that, or my age. But anyway, she always starts with specific praise that is genuine, and people love to hear about themselves. So if you start with that, you've now opened them up, and then ask a question of what's important to you. For example, Amy is an extraordinary marketer, and you tell her that, and then you say, I would really like to learn more about the skills that you developed early on. Is there a way that I could, without taking any of your time, learn from you? And she might say, just walk with me here, or just come to this meeting with me. So there is that sort of that way of saying, don't, instead of saying, will you be my mentor? Which the only answer is no, because everybody is really busy. But to say, could I just, walk with you down in the elevator? I have one question for you. That's one way to do it. And you've got to have the questions that matter to you, that you think will matter to that person. The other thing that Cheryl taught me and we've interacted now since 2013 because of our shared passion for women, is the offer to help has to be specific. So you might say, as a younger person, I really want to help you. And that's a burden. So you think about, by helping you, what I'd like to do for you is look at all the research that we have access to, and then I'm going to collate it for you or do something.
Yeah.
So the specific help that you offer, then I could just say yes or no. I could probably would say, oh my God, you're such a doll. Would you please do that for me?
That was how I ended up becoming better friends with Eileen in the early days. Was she was starting Women At here in New York, and I said, well, let me just come and I'll take notes and follow through on the action items. And she was like, great. But it was in being very specific with how I could help with something that was important to her, but very tactical and specific. So last question. Or we have two. You guys want to both fire them away?
So I wanted to ask about the slide where you had perceptions of new leaders compared to old leaders, and what you think will prevent the new leaders from ending up like the old leaders.
I love it.
Do you think that it's the company's culture or something with millennials that will end up changing things for the future, or will we sort of see how things are happening from the old leaders' perspective and say, we got to get in line?
So there's this psychological research that was done on monkeys. And it was, I'm trying to remember, I think Adam Grant wrote it up in the book Option B, but McKinsey uses it a lot as well. So there's this notion that there are a bunch of monkeys, they're in a pen, and there's a beautiful bunch of bananas up these stairs, and the first monkey goes up to get it, and he gets doused with, water, like really a horrible hose. He falls down. So the second monkey goes, I can do better, I can do this, goes up, water. Third monkey, after a while the monkeys stop going up the ladder to get the bananas because they know what's coming. The monkeys die, sad, but it happens. They take the monkey out, they put a new monkey in. The monkey doesn't go up the ladder, the new monkey. And why is that happening? Because the older monkeys are saying, you go up the ladder, you're gonna get like shot with water. It's a horrible experience. Don't do it. Now, obviously, they do that in monkey talk, but they figure out, they literally hold that young monkey from doing that thing. That's my fear. My fear is that cultures tend to show us how to be successful, and the young people who are the most successful in the culture's definition will mold to look like the leaders. And this is one of the many, many reasons why it's harder for women than men, because men are more capable of mirroring the man at the top that they see. It's much harder for women to do that. The second thing that happens to people is you get successful. So you're a young person and you're getting success in this formula that you're using, that you don't even know you have, but it becomes a formula pretty quickly, and then you just repeat it. And as you are successful, your mind starts to shut down. You like, I'm successful doing this. This is efficient. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again and again. Make all this money and be famous and all those things. And you close yourself down. And so one of the things I noticed when I interviewed older, very successful leaders is they weren't that curious. They had it. They knew the story. They delivered the story, and they were done. So those are the two like giant rocks that are threatening to crush you as you go through the ladder. And I think what you could do to avoid it is, one, as a community, shift the culture, which can actually be done pretty quickly. The leaders have to want to do it, they have to role model it. And the second is to ask yourself all the time, what can I learn here? You just start with that. I'm successful, what can I learn here? It'll help.
Thanks.
I learned a lot. I always do from you, Joanna.
I'll ask you later.
Okay, I'll be here.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Stay curious, and we will do our best to grow and continue to grow while we work here at Google. So everybody, thank you.
Thank you.